The first thing I noticed was that room 214 was warm. Not a little warm, the way classrooms get after a sunny afternoon with the blinds half open and 30 children breathing recycled air. I mean warm in a private, deliberate way, as if someone had turned the room into a pocket of summer and sealed it up for later. I was emptying hallway trash after 9 that evening, moving my cart along the second-floor science wing, and when I passed the door, I felt the heat through my sleeve before I even touched the handle. At that hour, the building usually settled into a kind of plain honesty. During the day, schools are full of declarations. Bells, announcements, fluorescent lights, shoes on tile, lunch trays, arguments, questions, apologies, last-minute laughter. At night, all that strips away. What remains is the building itself, the weight of cinder block walls, the tired hum of rooftop units, the soft ticking inside old clock housings, the faint mineral smell from drinking fountains that should have been replaced 10 years earlier. I preferred the building at night. People sometimes assumed that meant I was a lonely man or a strange one. Maybe both were true in moderate amounts. But the real reason was simpler. At night, systems reveal themselves. In the daytime, a school is mostly personalities. At night, it becomes plumbing, electrical load, airflow, custodial chemistry, scheduling logic, and the accumulated habits of thousands of people who leave traces without realizing it. A classroom after the students are gone can tell you more about a week than any staff meeting. Room 214 had been locked at 6:30 when I started my second-floor run. I remembered because the latch on that door stuck in damp weather, and I had made a note to tell maintenance before the weekend. Yet now, around 9 to 10, the room felt occupied. I set my trash liner roll on the cart and stood still. Inside, nothing moved in any ordinary way. No footsteps, no shifting chairs, no whispering, just a faint, intermittent sound that could have been paper brushing against paper. Then it stopped. Then it came again. I slid my key into the cylinder. The door opened an inch and met resistance. Not a body. Not exactly. More like a desk angled wrong against the door. I pushed a little, and warm air came out with the stale, damp smell of perspiration, and something else beneath it. Something sour and metallic I couldn't identify right away. "Anybody in here?" I said. No answer. I opened the gap, just enough to look through. The room lights were off. Security spill from the hallway showed the front whiteboard, a row of black lab tables, and one student desk dragged near the door. A backpack lay open on the floor. Papers were spread around it in a rough half-circle. At the far side of the room, near the windows, someone was sitting on the ground, with their back against the cabinets. At first, I thought it was a student asleep after some kind of after-school event. It happened once or twice a year. A theater kid in costume hiding from embarrassment. A boy who missed his bus and decided not to tell anyone. A child from a bad home stretching the day as long as possible. Schools hold more than lessons. Everybody who works in one knows that. Then the person lifted their head. It was a girl, maybe 12 or 13, old enough for middle school. Still enough that for a second, she looked like a photograph. Her face had the gray, pinched look of somebody with a bad fever. One side of her cardigan was stained dark. Her eyes were open, but not with any focus I recognized. She tried to stand and failed. Then she made a small sound in her throat and dragged one hand across the tile toward me. Not pleading, not exactly reaching, just moving. I closed the door. Not hard, just all the way. Then I stood there with my hand on the latch and listened to the room return to stillness. I had worked at San Geronimo Middle School for 11 years by then, first as substitute custodial support, later as full night janitor for the North Wing. Before that, I spent 15 years in commercial maintenance, most of it in office parks, where nobody noticed the floors unless something sticky got on their shoes. I was 52, recently divorced in the civilized, tired way people get divorced after a long time, with no slammed doors and no dramatic speeches, just paperwork, practical sadness, and a mutual decision not to be less kind than necessary. My daughter, Elena, was in Sacramento studying landscape architecture. She sent me pictures of trees with labels the way other people sent pictures of pets. My life at that point was simple enough to fit on a laminated card. I woke around noon, coffee in the same blue mug, small apartment over a dry cleaner, a slow hour reading whatever local government bulletin or maintenance forum held my attention that day. Dinner before work, if I remembered. Shift started at 4 in the afternoon. Unlock supply cage, review teacher notes, check chemical dilution stations, walk the campus once before dusk to see what the day had done. Bathrooms first, cafeteria second, hallways third, then classrooms by wing, starting with the sections that generated the most paper and the least gratitude. I don't say that bitterly. Schools are good places to work if you respect repetition. Every day produces disorder in nearly the same shape. My job was to return surfaces to possibility. Sweep, wipe, mop, restock, close, reset. Tomorrow would arrive whether the floor shone or not, but I liked giving it a clean place to land. The campus itself sat at the edge of town, where the newer housing tracts thinned into dry fields and eucalyptus windbreaks. It had been built in stages over 40 years, which meant no two wings agreed about anything. The oldest classrooms were low concrete rectangles with narrow windows and deep overhangs. The science block had been added in the late 90s and still believed in exposed ducts and cheerful paint. The library was newer than both and full of design mistakes. The gym was indestructible. The cafeteria smelled faintly of baked cheese, no matter how often it was cleaned. By district standards, we were fortunate. 3 years before the outbreak, the county had given grants to several schools for emergency resilience upgrades after a bad wildfire season. San Geronimo got rooftop solar canopies over the faculty lot, a battery bank for critical systems, upgraded exterior lighting, and a diesel generator tied into the gym, kitchen refrigeration, the nurse's office, and one section of the administration wing. Officially, it was so the campus could function as a temporary disaster shelter after earthquakes, fires, or planned power shutoffs. Unofficially, it meant we were one of the few public buildings in town that could stay half alive when the grid got unreliable. I understood that infrastructure better than some of the administrators did. Not because I was smarter, just because I spent more time with the pipes and panels than they did. So when I saw the girl in room 214, I didn't think haunting or intruder or anything dramatic. I thought of procedure. I thought of liability. I thought of fever, lost time, and how long a child could go without water in a heated room before confusion set in. I radioed the front office. No answer. That in itself wasn't strange. By 9, most of the front staff were home, and the day custodian was usually working the far portables with his own headset turned low. I tried again. Then I called the custodial supervisor's number, straight to voicemail. Then the school nurse, whose emergency contact was still on the internal list because she was one of the few people who actually answered after hours. She picked up on the 4th ring. Her voice sounded dry and far away. "Hello?" "This is Martin," I said, "night custodian at San Geronimo. I found a student in room 214. She looks sick. Very sick." There was a pause long enough for me to hear some television talking in the background. Then she said, "Is she responsive?" "Not in a useful way." "Does she know her name?" "I didn't ask. She's in bad shape." Another pause. "Did she bite anyone?" It was such a specific question that I almost missed it. "No," I said. "Not that I know of." "Did you go near her?" I opened the door. "You need to lock the room," she said, and now she sounded fully awake. "Lock it, and don't let anyone else in." I looked at the closed door in front of me. Shouldn't I call an ambulance? "You can try." "Try?" "There are delays," she said. "Martin, listen to me carefully. Is there blood?" "A stain on her sweater." "Is she breathing normally?" "I don't know what normal is in this case." "Lock the room," she said again. "Then call 911 and tell them possible encephalitic presentation, altered consciousness, potential aggression. Use those words." "You've seen this before?" "I've seen enough today." That was the first honest warning I got, and it did not come from the county, or the district office, or the city website with its polished little advisories about temporary service disruptions. It came from a tired school nurse standing in her kitchen, telling me to relock a classroom door. I did. Then I called 911 and got a recorded message about elevated emergency volume. It didn't say anything dramatic. Public systems never do. The recording thanked me for my patience in the same tone banks use when their websites fail. I left a description, location, probable age, symptoms. Then I called the police non-emergency line and got a similar cue. Then I called the district emergency contact. No answer. At 10:15, I checked room 214 again through the door window. The girl had moved closer. She was sitting with one shoulder against the lower cabinet beneath the sink. Her head tilted a little whenever hallway light shifted. Her mouth opened and closed as if she were trying to remember how breathing worked. By 10:32, more classrooms had unexplained occupants. Room 209, where an older boy in PE clothes stood near the back wall swaying in place. Room 216, where someone had smeared both palms on the interior glass. I had not seen either of them enter. The exterior gates were locked. The main office had been empty since dusk. The back parking lot lights were on, the campus cameras functioning, and yet students were in rooms they should not have been in. That was when I stopped thinking of it as a medical delay and started thinking in patterns. Children usually cluster. They move in groups even when they want solitude. If one frightened student had hidden in a classroom, 3 more in separate science rooms suggested either a coordinated prank, which their condition ruled out, or a process already larger than the campus. The nurse's question about biting now seemed less strange. So did the quiet, flat emergency bulletin I had half ignored that morning while drinking coffee. Regional school closures under review due to neurological illness of unknown origin. At the time, it had sounded like one more bureaucratic phrase built to avoid causing parents unnecessary alarm. But people who don't want to alarm you are often the first to know they should. I took my cart downstairs, locked the custodial closet, and went to the library workroom where the staff computers were usually left logged out, but the district emergency folders sat in a filing cabinet. I knew which key opened it. One benefit of being a janitor is that everyone assumes you're invisible around paper. The folder held shelter plans, utility shut-off maps, student release procedures, and a county memo from 6 months earlier about infectious events. Most of it was standard language: isolate affected persons, limit contact, preserve calm, coordinate with public health. But clipped to the back was a newer packet I had not seen. The top sheet had been copied badly, as if somebody had wanted quick circulation more than clean text. It mentioned reanimation only once, and even then in quotation marks, the way embarrassed professionals refer to something that has already stopped being hypothetical. I sat down in the workroom and read it twice. Acute febrile onset, rapid cognitive decline, motor persistence after cessation of higher function, extreme risk associated with saliva and blood exposure, patients drawn to familiar environments, intermittent dormancy, strong orientation towards sound and movement, containment over treatment where immediate care unavailable. The clinical language did not make it less frightening. It made it more organized. I remember feeling, not panic, but offense. The sort of calm irritation you feel when you discover that several departments have known something important for at least a day, and none of them have been honest about it. I had spent the afternoon replacing toilet paper and unclogging a faculty sink, while some tier of government debated wording for the end of the world. Outside, through the library windows, the parking lot lights cast clean white rectangles across the asphalt. A paper cup rolled from one painted line to another. Everything looked in order. That is what I still remember most clearly from those first hours. The way systems remain visually attacked long after they have failed. Around 11, maintenance van pulled into the service lane. I watched from the office side window until I recognized Luis Ortega climbing out. Luis was head groundskeeper for the cluster and knew more about irrigation lines, gate motors, and small engine repair than anyone I'd met who still described himself modestly. He was 60 if he was a day, with steady hands and a preference for sharpening tools by hand instead of replacing them. During normal life, we argued amicably about leaf blowers versus rakes. He said machines made men lazy. I said men invented machines because rakes were annoying. We had been having some version of that argument for 7 years. He came inside by the custodian entrance, holding a flashlight and a pry bar. "Phones are useless," he said before I could speak. "Roads are beginning to clog. They told me to check campuses and lock down any site with vulnerable access." "There are kids in the science wing," I said. He nodded once, as if that was what he had expected. "In rooms?" "Yes." "Alive?" "Not in the regular sense." "Then those doors stay shut." He said it with such plain certainty that the title of everything that followed could probably have been written in that moment. Certain classrooms should stay locked, not because of folklore or superstition, because by then, classrooms had become traps built around habit. Children, teachers, and staff had gone where they always went. They had taken themselves, knowingly or not, to rooms assigned by subject, routine, and memory. The campus was beginning to collect the people it knew. Luis and I walked the perimeter together. 3 exterior gates. 2 latched correctly, one with a bent hinge that could be forced if someone had time. The cafeteria doors were sealed. The portable classrooms on the east lot were empty, though one had a broken window from months earlier, still patched with plywood. The admin wing was clear. In the nurse's office, we found 2 cots, stripped bare, a half-used box of gloves, and notes written in quick blue pen. "Don't let them near the well. Students, keep the library quiet. Call county if generator fails." The handwriting belonged to Nurse Patel. She had never been dramatic. If she wrote something down, it mattered. "Where is she now?" I asked. Luis shook his head. We heard movement from the far hallway then, a slow shuffling that resolved itself into 3 distinct impacts against a door. Not frantic, rhythmic. The building was already teaching us the new sound of occupied rooms. We locked the science wing fire doors and chained the interior handles with supplies from the theater storage cage. Then we sat in the main office reception area, lit by 1 desk lamp and the green glow from the alarm panel, and made the first useful plan of the outbreak. It was not a heroic plan. Heroic plans are for men who believe events will reward boldness. What we needed was a facilities plan. Water, power, food, waste, sleep, access control, noise discipline, medical separation. Those categories formed the first page of my notebook. If you ever want to know what kind of person someone is, watch what they list first when ordinary life breaks down. I wrote water before weapons. That still feels like the correct choice. The school had advantages. City water pressure was still stable that night, and even if service failed later, every toilet tank, pipe section, and water heater on campus was stored time. The cafeteria freezers held several days of food if power lasted. The battery system could carry critical circuits until dawn and reduce load on the generator. The gym showers meant drains, floor space, and privacy if we had to isolate people. The nurse's office had basic medical supplies. The library had blackout curtains and thick carpet, which made it the best sleeping space. The maintenance shed held tools enough to solve most problems except fuel. The disadvantages were equally clear. Too many windows, too many doors, too much glass at child height, too much emotional gravity. People know how to come to a school. In a crisis, they head toward what once organized their days. "Your apartment?" Luis asked. "Third floor over a dry cleaner." He nodded. "Then you stay here." It was not an order. It was math. My apartment had one narrow stair, no backup power, little food, and neighbors who argued through the walls over ordinary things. The school had infrastructure. Also, I knew it well enough to move through it without thought. So before midnight, while the town was still trying to tell itself this was a temporary health emergency, I decided not to go home. I called Elena and got voicemail. I left a message that was too practical and therefore, in hindsight, too revealing. "Cell networks are crowded," I said. "I'm staying on campus because we have backup systems here. Don't drive home if you were thinking of it. Stay where there's controlled entry and stored water. Call me when you can." Then I went to the faculty lounge, took the framed photo of district retirees off the wall, and used the back of the frame to cover part of the interior window beside the door. It seemed useful at the time. During the first week, many small practical acts felt larger than they were, simply because they were chosen. By morning, the town had changed shape. We could see it from the second-floor west windows. Not dramatic fireballs, not crowds running, mostly absence. Fewer cars than there should have been. One city bus stopped crooked across an intersection with its door open, a dog moving along the sidewalk with no leash and no person. Grocery carts in the pharmacy lot. Smoke from somewhere residential, thin and unhurried. The district issued a recorded closure notice at 6:20 a.m. All schools closed until further notice. Staff to remain home unless engaged in emergency duties. Students and families told to shelter in place and await county communication. It sounded like weather. Then, an hour later, 3 people arrived at the north gate. Assistant Principal Dana Mercer, still wearing her work blouse from the day before. A 7th grade history teacher named Colin Reeves, pale and limping. And Nurse Patel, carrying 2 plastic supply bins and looking as if she had not slept. We let them in through the service entrance after checking Colin's leg. He had cut it climbing a fence, not from a bite. Nurse Patel examined him anyway with a kind of exhausted courtesy and cleared him to enter. That morning, our population became 5. By noon, it became 8. A cafeteria manager named Sonia, a district bus mechanic named Eric, who had come looking for diesel inventory and decided not to leave again. 2 sisters from the neighborhood, one 14 and one 9, who had spent the night in a backyard shed after their mother drove away with their stepfather to get medicine and never returned. We brought them in through the gym and washed them at the locker room sinks because it felt like a useful ritual. Children calm down if you give them sequence. Hands, face, arms, shoes, sit, drink, breathe. The school began to reveal its second life. It is hard to explain to people who have never maintained a public building how much thought has already been stored in one. Even a mediocre school is a machine for moving bodies through time, bells, schedules, exits, cafeterias, storage, drains, sightlines, access restrictions, specialized rooms, supply distribution. Once we stopped trying to preserve the old purpose exactly, the campus became an almost ideal shelter. The library became sleeping quarters because it had thick carpet, few exterior doors, and enough shelving to create small zones without making anyone feel penned in. The circulation desk became our main station because it had outlets, a wide counter, and a habit of centrality. People liked gathering where they once asked for help. The cafeteria kitchen became logistics. Sonia made the first serious inventory there and discovered enough dry goods, canned fruit, frozen vegetables, milk powder, and institutional peanut butter to feed 8 people carefully for weeks, longer if we supplemented from classroom emergency kits and vending stock. We turned the walk-in refrigerator into a strict-use space and posted times. She ran it like a ship galley, which is to say with patience and no tolerance for improvisation that wasted heat. The nurse's office became triage and quarantine, though we used it as little as possible because none of us wanted to need it. Patel sorted antibiotics, pain relievers, saline, gloves, masks, disinfectants, and splint materials with the same calm hand she might once have used for hearing tests. The gym became storage, laundry lines, and exercise when the younger girl, Marisol, grew restless and needed somewhere to run without attracting attention outdoors. Later it became a place for lessons, though we did not know that yet. The shop classroom, which technically belonged to the district's career wing and had escaped years of budget trimming because no one could agree what to do with it, became our repair bay. Eric and I spent 2 days in there converting shelving into rolling barriers, checking extension cords, and cataloging every fastener in the drawers like men who still believed labeling things could keep the world attached. And the classrooms, ordinary classrooms with maps and dried marker trays and laminated posters, became something more complicated. Some stayed useful. Home rooms with intact blinds and one door became storage for blankets, paper products, and bottled water. The art room became a sorting space for cloth, tape, cardboard, and tools nobody remembered the educational purpose of, but which were excellent for making useful things. One 6th grade room became the girls' private space because children need doors they control. But certain classrooms stayed locked. The science rooms first, because that was where we had found the earliest infected, and because the sinks, tile, and lab cabinets made those rooms strangely persistent. Sound carried poorly in them. If something was inside, it often stayed inside for long periods, striking the door only when movement in the hall drew attention. Then room 108 in the old language wing, because we heard a teacher's voice through it one afternoon, reciting attendance in the same measured tone over and over, until Patel recognized the cadence and sat down on their hallway floor. We never opened that door. Then the kindergarten-style special support room near the counseling office, because small chairs had been piled against the interior glass from inside, and a soft knocking came from it, whenever Marisol cried. Then the band room, eventually, because the instrument lockers amplified everything and made the movements inside sound like a crowd. We learned not to moralize about locked rooms. They were not punishments. They were boundaries between one kind of need and another. There is a tremendous peace in clear boundaries when the rest of life has become uncertain. Our routine established itself the way routines always do, not through speeches, but through repetition that proves useful. I took first round every morning just after dawn because I had always been a better worker at the edge of sleep than in the middle of it. I checked generator fuel, battery readouts, water pressure in the admin wing, clogged toilets, exterior gates, and the state of the locked rooms. I cleaned because cleaning remained necessary. Not as an old habit, though it was that too. As public health, as morale, as proof we were still a community and not merely a cluster of frightened bodies behind doors. There is comfort in a freshly mopped hallway even at the end of the world. Patel monitored everyone's temperature twice a day and taught the older girl, Nia, how to log symptoms properly. Sonia ran meals. Luis handled exterior checks at noon when sun and heat kept most of the infected sluggish. Eric maintained fuel well, rigged a safer transfer line for the generator, and taught Colin how to inspect belts without losing fingers. Dana, who had spent years shepherding middle schoolers and dealing with parents in parking lots, turned out to be naturally suited to civil order. She organized sleeping assignments, sanitation rotations, and conflict before conflict quite arrived. Colin surprised me most. History teachers, I had always assumed, lived mostly in paper and talk. But in crisis, he became useful in the old human way. He made maps, drew schedules by hand, told the younger children what had happened without lying, and spent an afternoon repairing library chairs with wood glue and string, because, as he said, if we're going to be here, the chairs might as well stand up straight. At night we kept the library dim, and the rest of the campus darker. Noise discipline mattered. The infected were not supernatural. That was almost a relief. They followed crude rules. Motion drew them. Sound gathered them. Familiar routes retained them. More than once, we watched through high windows as former students drifted toward the bike racks, then the quad, then the classroom doors they had once used each day without thinking. Memory, stripped of personhood, looked a lot like traffic. The first week passed in measurements. How many gallons remained in the water heaters if mains failed? How long one diesel drum would last at partial generator load? How many meals could be made from cafeteria rice if we reduced portions by a quarter cup? How many exterior windows could be reinforced with library shelving before we ran out of brackets? How many minutes it took to cross from library to nurse's office without making enough sound to stir the nearest occupied classroom? Those calculations soothed me. Numbers do not fix events, but they place edges around them. Twice we received radio traffic from county emergency channels, though never anything complete. The battery-powered weather radio in the front office, after much coaxing and 2 antenna adjustments, gave us fragments. Shelter sites overwhelmed, highway access restricted, avoid direct contact with infected persons, boil water if system pressure drops, use public buildings only if secured, expect delayed response. None of it told us what the future was. It only confirmed that we had already entered it. On the 9th day, city water pressure fell. Not all at once. First, the staff lounge tap coughed air. Then the far restroom in B-Wing lost flow. Then the gym showers reduced to a thin, complaining stream. Because I had been watching the system, I recognized the pattern before anyone else had to know. We spent the afternoon filling every clean container on campus. Stock pots from the cafeteria, mop buckets newly sanitized, trash cans lined with contractor bags, sports coolers from the PE storage room, science beakers for all I cared. When pressure failed completely that night, we were inconvenienced rather than doomed. And in a situation like that, the difference feels almost luxurious. The school had 3 commercial water heaters, 2 still half full. The boiler loops were closed systems and no help for drinking, but the hot water tanks and domestic lines held enough reserve to matter. Eric and I shut valves and drained what we could into food-safe containers. After that, we shifted to conservation and treatment. Rain would have been ideal, but California spring had already begun leaning dry. So we improvised. The solar canopies over the faculty lot fed into battery storage through a control room the district had used mostly to boast about sustainability. Under normal life, they offset electrical costs and generated cheerful statistics for board meetings. Under our life, they became the difference between refrigeration and spoiled food. Eric figured out which non-critical circuits could stay off permanently. We shut classroom HVAC, decorative exterior lights, and every unnecessary office device. The batteries kept kitchen cooling, the library charging station, select hallway lights, and our radio setup alive during daylight. The diesel generator ran only in scheduled blocks. A school is full of hidden capacity if you stop trying to power it like school. For water, Luis remembered the condensate drains from the library and admin HVAC units. In ordinary summers, those lines produced enough clean runoff to stain the stucco. We rerouted them into sealed bins and filtered the result through layered cloth and treatment tablets from the emergency kit. Not enough for extravagance, enough for survival, especially when paired with rationing and the remaining bottled stock. Later, when a light rain finally came, we spread clean tarps over the basketball court and ran the runoff through makeshift gutters into barrels. It was ugly and effective, which is the best kind of engineering. Food settled us. People talk about defense in these situations because it makes for a cleaner story. But what truly occupies most days is food. Not only calories, planning, rotation, spoilage, appetite, fairness, the emotional weather around a spoonful of peaches when peaches have become rare. Sonia understood this instinctively. She made rice taste like intention. She turned cafeteria beans, canned tomatoes, and a packet of taco seasoning into something that reminded all of us of field trips and fundraisers. She rationed the freezer without making anyone feel measured. When one of the girls cried because she missed cereal, Sonia toasted broken oats on sheet pans and served them warm with powdered milk and sugar and called it school granola, which was not accurate, but improved morale. I found comfort in smaller objects, the weight of ringed keys at my belt, the faint drag of a full mop across waxed linoleum, the smell of copy paper in storage rooms, a pencil sharpener mounted to a wall no one used anymore. When public life collapses, old textures become companions. The outbreak outside matured slowly, and because we watched it from a school, we saw it through patterns of attendance. At first, there were many. Students in uniforms from the charter school down the road, parents in work clothes, delivery drivers, a crossing guard still wearing a reflective vest. They drifted through campus edges in ones and twos, then collected where gates held them. Not with purpose exactly, but with residue of purpose. They came to places once associated with drop-off, pick-up, lunch, morning lines, dismissal. Then, around the third week, the numbers thinned. Not because the danger ended, more because the region sorted itself. The mobile ones kept moving. The trapped remained trapped. The ones bound to familiar places stayed where memory had last given them shape. Our campus, being a school, retained a difficult share of those. You could see them most clearly near midday, when light flattened the courtyard. An older boy standing beside the bike racks as though waiting for a friend. A woman in office slacks at the parent check-in buzzer. Two smaller children lingering near the mural wall. This, more than any grotesque detail, made the outbreak feel sorrowful. Violence would have been easier in a way, easier to hate, easier to narrate. What we had instead were bodies still obeying outlines drawn by ordinary life. The changed did not become monsters in my mind. They became proof of how deeply routine enters us. That was the logic behind the locked classrooms, too. Over time, we learned which rooms called to the infected and which did not. Science rooms, for reasons I never fully proved, drew the most. Perhaps because the earliest cluster on our campus had begun there. Perhaps because the sinks provided water during the initial fever stage. Perhaps because second-floor heat rose and the rooms held it. The band room attracted former music students. The counseling suite seemed to pull the disoriented. Room 108, Old Language Arts, was never opened because Patel quietly told us her brother had taught there for 2 years before transferring districts, and on the second day of the outbreak, he had come to visit her during lunch. He had not made it back out. We did not discuss it often after that. In long survival, there are always rooms made sacred by practicality. Our small society improved by degrees. Eric got the shop room vise working again and used it to fabricate metal braces for 2 compromised gates. Louise started a garden in the central courtyard, using soil from the horticulture beds and irrigation tubs repurposed as planters. Lettuce, radish, green onion, herbs. Not enough to feed 8 people fully, but enough to break the tyranny of canned texture. When the first lettuce heads came up, Marisol ran her fingers over them as if they were exotic pets. Donna recovered district tablets from locked cabinets and used the remaining battery life to download every offline educational file she could before the network died for good. She said if children were going to grow up inside a school, the least we could do was preserve the school part. So mornings in the gym began to include lessons, math on the whiteboard, reading circles, quiet handwriting practice. Nia rolled her eyes the first few days and then began correcting my punctuation when she helped inventory supply labels. I resumed waxing floors in sections where we actually lived. That may sound absurd. Maybe it was. But floor finish does 2 useful things. It protects material and it reflects light. A polished corridor under low pour needs fewer fixtures to feel safe. Also, maintenance is a form of faith. You preserve what you hope to use. One evening, Colin found me burnishing the library hall and leaned against the wall with a stack of salvaged notebooks. "You know," he said, "if someone wrote this down later, they'd make it about barricades." "Barricades are only part of it," I said. "They'd still do it. Men love a barricade. So do historians." He smiled. True. He sat on an overturned milk crate while I worked. Through the high windows, the sky was going amber over the baseball fields. Somewhere out in town, a car alarm pulsed and then died. "I keep thinking," he said, "how close daily life always is to another arrangement." "That sounds like something from one of your classes." "It probably is." I switched off the machine and listened to the finish settle. "Buildings are like that," I said. "People think they have one purpose. Mostly they have structure and utilities. Purpose is assigned afterward. That's comforting or bleak. Depends whether the plumbing holds." He wrote that down, which irritated me because it made me sound more thoughtful than I am. By the second month, we had contact with other survivors, though not in the dramatic fashion people imagine. No desperate pounding at the gate, no armed convoy. Just radio, then sight, then a scheduled exchange. A church shelter 3 miles south had stabilized around 23 people in a fellowship hall with a fenced preschool yard and a retired contractor overseeing generator use. A veterinary clinic near the highway housed 6 adults and a teenager because it had solar and a well. Someone at the water treatment office remained alive long enough to broadcast valve advice on amateur channels, which helped half the county more than any official statement. Our first trade with the church involved 3 boxes of pediatric medicine from the nurse's office in exchange for fuel, onions, and 2 intact bicycles. Dana objected to giving up medical stock. Patel overruled her calmly. "Medicine without community becomes hoarding," she said. "We're not building that kind of place." So Luis and Eric made the run before dawn, and when they came back, they described a world that had not ended uniformly, only fragmentedly. Some streets empty, some houses occupied, some blocks impossible, people adapting according to what their buildings allowed. That sentence stayed with me. People adapting according to what their buildings allowed. A school allows certain kinds of adaptation: order, storage, group life, quiet supervision, compartments. If I had found myself in a shopping center, I suppose I would have learned commerce. In a hospital, triage. In a farmhouse, acreage. But in a middle school, the apocalypse arranged itself into periods, zones, line management, and posted expectations. We never hung a list of rules, because I had seen enough of inherited rules in normal life to know they often become substitutes for judgment. Instead, we kept a board in the library under 5 headings. Today, needs, repairs, watch, remember. That last category was Dana's idea. At first, she wrote practical things: fuel count, radio times, harvest date, then names, then birthdays, then small pieces of old life people mentioned in passing. Marisol misses orange popsicles. Patel's mother always sang while cutting mango. Martin's daughter hates eucalyptus smell and loves redwoods. It was not sentimentality. It was continuity management. Meaning enters survival quietly. For me, it arrived through the classrooms. Once the campus settled into our hands, I found myself passing closed doors with less fear and more attention. The posters left up in windows: fractions, earth layers, sentence starters, anti-bullying slogans, an essay prompt about community service, a laminated set of lab safety icons no one had taken down. Behind some of those doors, movement still came and went in patient intervals. A shoe scraped, a desk leg tapped, soft impact against interior glass. The sounds no longer startled me. They became part of the building's acoustic map, as reliable in their way as the clicking return of the library vent. I began checking each locked classroom the same way each morning: stand to the side, inspect the lower window first, then the upper. Listen. Note changes. Move on. It was a janitor's version of prayer, not asking for anything, just acknowledging occupancy. In ordinary times, schools ask too much of walls. They're supposed to contain development, discipline, boredom, aspiration, hormones, grief, lunch smells, and standardized testing all at once. I had spent years scrubbing those walls and thinking little of it. During the outbreak, I understood something different. A classroom is a promise shaped like a box. Sit here. Learn this. Tomorrow will continue from where today left off. When tomorrow broke, the rooms kept holding the outline. I don't mean that romantically. Some days, the locked classrooms were just sad. There were hours when the heat built up in the second-floor wing, and the doors gave off that same trapped warmth I had first noticed in room 214. There were days when a thump from behind a panel made Marisol jump and sent all of us into a hush. There were nights when I walked the halls and felt the old tiredness of institutional light so strongly that I could almost imagine dismissal had simply run late. But over time, the school changed from shelter to settlement. The courtyard garden expanded. Eric got one of the district maintenance trucks running on siphoned fuel and used it to haul soil, lumber, and a stack of portable fencing panels. We enclosed part of the staff parking lot for safer outdoor work. Naya organized the library by subject because she was at that age when competence can become identity overnight. Colin began teaching actual history lessons again, not because exams mattered, but because chronology does. Children need to know events happened in sequence and not all at once. Patel, with remarkable patience, trained all of us in wound cleaning, contamination procedure, and what signs not to ignore. By then, every survivor group in the region had its own language for the infected, Rotters, sleepers, biters, returners. We mostly called them the sick when we needed a term at all. It felt truer and less triumphant. There were losses, of course. Long stories like this can become dishonest if they sand away the cost. Colin got a fever in late June after a scrape on the south fence and spent 30 hours in the nurse's office, while Patel and I took turns convincing ourselves it was heat and infection, not infection. It passed. He lived. But for a day, the whole library breathed around his temperature chart. Luis did not live to autumn, not because of a dramatic attack, because he slipped while clearing debris from the roof drains after the first real storm, fractured his hip, and developed complications we were no longer equipped to treat. He spent his last week in the library, by the reference shelves, facing the courtyard he had turned green. He complained once about the soup and twice about my pruning technique. Then, 2 days before he died, he asked me to keep the North Gate rollers greased because, in his words, a gate should never sound more tired than the man opening it. Afterward, I wrote that, under remember, his death altered the campus more than any locked door had. The infected belonged to an outside negotiation. A preventable human death brought us back to ourselves with much greater force. For weeks I heard his absence in the grounds, no rake on the paving stones, no muttered Spanish at a stubborn hinge, no pocket knife tapping a hose coupling. The garden continued because he had arranged it well. That was his last lesson to us. Good systems outlast good men. By winter, we had 21 people on campus. Not all at once. They came in drifts. A mother and son from the East Subdivision. An elderly couple transferred from the church shelter when his oxygen concentrator failed and they needed our battery capacity. 2 paraprofessionals from the elementary school who arrived with district files in plastic totes and a habit of organizing children that immediately improved everything. A woman from the vet clinic who knew enough about antibiotics and animal feed to be useful twice over. A quiet electrician named Ben who repaired our inverter cabinet and then stayed because nowhere else offered both purpose and hot tea. Growth changed our needs. The library remained our heart, but no longer our only room. We opened the gym-side classrooms for family sleep spaces. We converted the art room fully into textiles and repair. The cafeteria schedule became formal. Water use had to be posted. Conflict required mediation rather than simple conversation. Dana took that on with a level of patient firmness I had once only seen her use on 7th grade boys who thought being loud counted as charisma. And still, certain classrooms stayed locked. New people always asked why. We would tell them plainly. Occupied, unsafe, patterned, do not open. Some accepted that at once. Others wanted fuller explanation, as if explanation might undo the fact. I sympathized. Locked doors are invitations to curiosity. But curiosity is not always a virtue. One of the great adult lessons, rarely taught directly, is that not every closed room improves through opening. By then, the outbreak itself had settled into the world like weather. Dangerous, local, variable. The first violent collapse had passed. What remained was attrition, adaptation, and geography. Some towns emptied, some fortified, some burned sections to create safer corridors. We heard of a college campus turned into a county farm cooperative, a marina community surviving on desalination and canned stock, an industrial park using welded roll-down doors and roof access to outlast almost anything. Our school became known on the radio as the campus shelter, though I disliked the phrase. It made us sound temporary. In truth, by the second year we were something else, a small civic organism with classrooms for storage and silence, with gardens and courtyards, with children learning fractions again, with maintenance logs, with morning rituals, with one wing permanently sealed because the world that made it had not fully released its hold. I often took evening rounds alone then, not because I needed to, but because walking remained how I thought. The hallways in late light were beautiful in the plain municipal way I had always liked. Waxed floors catching amber, trophy cases dim and irrelevant, bulletin boards curling at the corners, the handrail on the B-wing stairs worn smooth by years of small palms. You can read the age of a school in the shine of the places children touch without noticing. Sometimes I would stop outside room 214, the first one, and listen. After enough time, people imagine stillness means vacancy. It doesn't. Some rooms held stillness like an object. Others held a different sort of occupancy, a latent one, as if the memory of motion had settled into the air itself. Room 214 had gone quiet months earlier. No impacts, no scraping, no shadows crossing the lower pane. Yet I kept it locked. Not from fear, from respect for the logic that had brought us through. The day you begin ignoring sound decisions because the emergency feels old is the day the emergency resumes. It was Marisol, of all people, who asked the clearest question. She was 11 by then, and had grown taller in the school, which I found both heartening and unfair. We were repainting one of the unlocked classrooms to use as a proper schoolroom for the younger children. She was holding the brush wrong and getting blue on her knuckles. "Do you think they remember being in there?" she asked. I knew at once which they she meant. "I don't know," I said. "Not like school things. Bigger things." I considered lying in the adult style, with a comforting answer, shaped mostly to soothe the speaker. But children know when you do that. "I think something remembers," I said. "I just don't know what part." She nodded as if that matched her own conclusion. That's why they go to the same places. "Maybe." She dragged the brush carefully along the taped edge. "I'm glad we don't." That stayed with me for weeks. Because she was right in one sense and wrong in another. We had not repeated the old patterns blindly. We had changed rooms, reassigned purposes, evolved systems. But we had also done what all survivors do. We built the future out of the nearest available architecture. We still gathered children in classrooms, still posted schedules, still rang a handbell for meals when the generator was off, still lined up cups on counters, still wrote names on boards. Humanity, too, returns to familiar rooms. The difference, I suppose, is that we can alter what those rooms mean. That is the part of the story that matters most to me now, years into it, with gray in my beard and stronger hinges on the north gate than the district ever installed. Not the first nights, not the radio fragments, not the way the changed moved through old drop-off lanes under morning fog. What matters is how quickly a place built for one version of community accepted another. When people imagine survival, they picture remote cabins or concrete bunkers, places stripped to basics. I understand the appeal. But basics are overrated. What saved us was not isolation. It was infrastructure shaped by ordinary public life, hand-washing stations, bulk food storage, wide corridors, institutional laundry, multiple exits, first aid cabinets, age-grouped rooms, notice boards, fenced outdoor space, schedules so deeply ingrained that strangers could cooperate inside them. A school already assumes the future will arrive in confused pieces and need organizing. That is why, if you had asked me before all this, where I would want to be in a long emergency, I might have said nowhere public, somewhere quiet, somewhere mine. I would have been wrong. Tonight, as I tell this, the library lamps are low, and the rain has just started on the skylight over the media corner. We reinforced that skylight twice. It still leaks into the same bucket. There are 6 children sleeping between the history shelves and the old computers. Dana is snoring softly in the office annex she once used for discipline meetings. Patel is on late watch with Ben in the nurse's station, checking a cough we think is only a cough. In the courtyard, winter greens are pushing through dark soil under mesh covers. Someone left a pair of muddy shoes outside the gym, and I will have to deal with that in the morning. I finished mopping the admin hallway an hour ago. People laugh, gently, that I still do it. But I know what clean floors mean. They mean we expect to walk them again. They mean the day has shape. They mean no matter what the town beyond the gates has become, this building remains legible to itself. Certain classrooms are still locked. Room 214, of course. Room 209. Room 216. Room 108. The counseling suite. The band room. Their doors have been reinforced, their windows covered from our side, their handles checked and rechecked over seasons of dust and rain and heat. New children on campus learn the boundaries without fear, because we teach them the way we teach everything else here. Plainly, as part of the map. Some rooms are for sleeping, some for learning, some for repair, some for growing food, some stay closed. That is not ominous to me anymore. It is merely true. Every community keeps closed rooms, spaces for grief, memory, contagion, mistakes that cannot be undone, but can be contained. The important thing is knowing which rooms those are, and not mistaking curiosity for wisdom. Sometimes, near dawn, when the generator is off, and the whole campus sits inside rain or wind or ordinary cold, I walk the second-floor corridor and rest my hand briefly against each locked door. The wood is usually cool, sometimes faintly warm.